You did? Did not. All right, this chair's a little bit high. It's one of the
Coach,
few
probably
coaches
not
in
the,
the league I can post up.
probably not the basketball clinic you'd have liked for the 1200th win, but I mean, getting it obviously it's pretty impressive.
It's, it kind of takes me back to, some of the games we played in the mid-'80s. They were all 60-something. Wasn't a whole lot of points being scored. It was hard to generate any offense. And so, yeah, it's like old time again. But some games the ball just doesn't find the basket, and you have to find other ways to win. You've got to do some other things until it turns. I was saying earlier, as far as the wins are concerned, when I sat down before the game, I thought back to the first time we ever played in this building. Might have been 1987 or something like that. I don't know. But it was a doubleheader with the men. I think our game was like at 5, something like that, 5 or 5:30. I'm not even sure. But I can't imagine there were 50 people in the building if you count the ushers and some parents that made the trip up. So that part really kind of hit home with me that, we went from that to this, and it's pretty, that's probably the most rewarding thing is that none of this, not only did none of this exist, this was never even remotely thought possible, and it's happened, and I don't think CD and I could be any more grateful for how it's turned out.
Speaking of CD, what's it like to achieve this accomplishment with her by your side throughout all of it?
Yeah, one of the things that I always thought was, if you want to do great things, then you have to know what your strengths and weaknesses are, and what your limitations are, and how far you can, you personally can take something at that point in time in your life. And I knew, very, 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 very early, before we even played our first game or before I got the job, that if she would agree to come here and coach with me and with us, that we could be good. Obviously, nobody envisioned that it would be this. I don't know how you could, but that decision, I think, made every other decision possible. I think had I gotten that one wrong, it would have been a whole lot of other wrong decisions going forward. So by getting that one right, I think we set ourselves up for something like this to occur. So I wouldn't be just saying it to say it if I didn't acknowledge that if she wasn't a part of this, it probably would not have happened. I can honestly say that.
Geno, one of the video montages tonight during a timeout was players being asked what they would tell their younger selves. Is there any wisdom you would impart on a 30-year-old version of you?
They tell you when you have children that you're born, the way they're born a certain way, and they pretty much stay that way. I mean, there might be, but a 3-year-old, when they're 33, they still have the same qualities. You can tell. So my 30-year-old as a coach and me now at my age as a coach, there's too many similarities. I'm not crazy about them, but there's too many similarities where I still react knowing after 40 years, knowing that I can't change the outcome, I can't change what's happening, I can't change, and yet I still react as if I actually think I can. And I would have told myself back then, yeah, there's going to be a lot of stuff that's going to happen that you have no control over and you will not be able to change no matter how hard you try. And you're just going to have to accept it. And knowing the difference between what to accept and what to fight for, I think I kind of always knew that. But and in reality, it would be hard to have a conversation with me as a 30-year-old because I have a perspective now that I didn't have then. And it's funny, wins don't, I think, define who you are, I've coached against a lot of great coaches that were tremendous at their job, didn't win a whole lot of games. I don't want to say that wins define who you are, but I fought hard for wins in the 80s and 90s, and I find that we're still fighting that fight just as hard today. And that's a good feeling to have.
Geno, to fight that and 1,200 wins in to still have the same energy, is that probably the greatest success of it all? Because you seem like you're still as excited as you were, back in 85 when you walked down the court.
Yeah, a lot of things go through your mind about how hard you were trying to prove that you could win. You could win some basketball games, and you had to prove it. There was no NIL deal for me back then, where you get paid ahead of time for not doing anything. You had to prove that you can do it. And it was never about so I could make more money. It was, I had to prove so I could do it. I had to prove it. And the challenge today is to prove that, not that you can do it, because I don't have to prove anything to anybody, except I got to prove to myself that I still can do it. And that's probably that's a harder fight than the one that was back then, right now, to prove to yourself that you can still do it.
The players have talked about it, being important to them to help you kind of continue building a legacy of success. Does that, I know you've said it doesn't mean a whole lot to you, but does it mean something to you that they care about it, about, continuing this program?
They should. They should. It should mean an awful lot to them because they're the ones doing it. I've always said that. I think it should mean a tremendous amount to any player that's ever played here to know that they had a hand in all this. And they actually did it. Obviously you remember every single player that ever played for you, but what I want them to remember is this was my contribution to that. And some of them were here in the stands. I saw them, and I want them to feel like part of that's mine. And that, I think, is what keeps bringing them back. I got a big sense of that a couple weekends ago. They all felt like this is part of this is mine. And I'm glad they feel that way.
Geno, you mentioned days when there was just 50 people in the building here. Tonight, in one little area alone, the area where you exit the court and fans can lean over, there had to be 50 or 100 like teenage girls or school-age girls, totally starstruck by the sight of an Aaliyah or Paige. What does it mean to you to have, that portion of the community kind of, you've captured their imagination over the years, and you could see on nights like this, or any night when you play downtown, what it means?
Yeah. It's funny, women's sports in general, but certainly women's basketball has reached a certain level of attention and appreciation that certainly didn't exist back in the 80s. And the more it's, and men had to buy into it. That was the big thing. Men had to buy into it. Getting guys to buy into it was the big thing, because women, they still don't. They don't do a great job of supporting other women athletes or women's sports in general. So you had to get the guys to buy in. And they wouldn't buy in the beginning, until all of a sudden they all started having kids that wanted to play basketball because they saw their idols play on TV. So once that transformation happened, then it became what it became. I think as dads who would go, I don't really care about women's basketball. Well, all of a sudden they have a 7-year-old who really cares about whoever that kid is on our team. That's her, her idol. Now all of a sudden they care. Now all of a sudden they come to games. Now they're going to go, to basketball camp. Now they want to play in high school, or they want to play. Those are the ancillary things that happen when you're just thinking we're just here to win games, but actually, we created a subculture that didn't exist, and that it wasn't there. And through a lot of hard work and a lot of people putting a lot of hard work into it, and a culture was born out of nothing. And it's not like it was a sleeping giant just waiting to be awoken. No, it was a roadkill, and there was nothing, less than nothing. And the people that were here in the beginning deserve a lot of credit for that. That beginning of that transformation. And when you look around, like if it didn't happen last week, you've heard me say this, like in today's world, if it didn't happen last week, it didn't happen. So anything that happened 3 weeks ago, or 2 months ago, or 5 years ago, it never happened. That's a rumor, But in order for us to appreciate what it is that we have today, we have to really remember what was here, who was here 20, 25, 30, 35 years ago. Because without appreciating them, you can't appreciate this.
Anything else? Okay, Roger, can you wait for the mic?
Did CD, or has CD just provided a great balance for you, or a complement to your strengths? How was she so important?
I think anytime two people work together, there always has to be a mesh of things that fit together. For instance, I have a lot of strengths that are the same as hers, and I have a lot of weaknesses that are the same as hers, and she has a lot of strengths that I don't have, and I have some strengths that she doesn't have. So we combine all those things and make it work. I know what I do, and I know what I'm good at, and I know what my input is, and she knows what hers is. And a lot of times, these things don't last very long, because somebody gets the idea that, I want to do it on my own, or I don't like the way we're doing it. Yeah, we're successful, but I'm not happy. very rarely does it work to this level, to this extent. So, if she had gotten, if she had taken a couple of the opportunities that came her way, it may have been very, very difficult to, not that like couldn't be done, but it would have been very, very difficult. So the fact that continuity for so long, I think it gives a little bit of stability to the kids that come in. There's a continuation of the same things that those young guys learned in 86, 87, 88. Megan and Debbie that are doing TV or in radio, or what Kara's doing, SNY. Those people will look back and they see CD as the, every great organization has that one person that's the storyteller, the person in charge of the culture, the legacy. They pass it along to everybody else, and they don't like it while it's happening, while they're here. But to use Sue Bird's favorite quote, whenever she would bitch and moan about how hard or how awful it was to be here in college, and what I put her through, blah, 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 blah. And I said, yeah, those had to be the worst 4 years of your life. I can't imagine that. I don't even know how you survived those 4 years, being everybody's idol, winning national championships. I said it must have been just torture for you to go through that up at Stores, be idolized as the greatest point guard ever, and blah, 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 blah. And she said, I just have 2 words to describe my 4 years at Connecticut that will explain what I mean. I said, what are they? She goes, pantyhose. Because whenever we went out to dinner, CD made them dress up and they had to wear pantyhose. So to this day, they remember shit like that. See, so you say, what's your strength? I could never get my players to wear pantyhose. I would have to do a Joe Namath pantyhose commercial. If there was,
They don't know what you're talking
but they don't know what I'm talking about. And yeah, so there's things that that happen in your program that live on forever, because those things are you're never allowed to forget them. You're never allowed to forget them. It's it's like how many I never had the opportunity, but how many people are fortunate enough to know both their grandparents for a long, long time. For a long, long time. That you know your grandparents for a long time. On both sides. Your mom and dad. It's a whole different level of stuff. And I never got to see that part of it. But my kids have. My grandkids have. So it's just a way of passing things down that you just don't ever let it kind of fend for itself. You have to nurture it every single day, or it can't ever last this long.
Maggie, and then we'll finish up with John.
Obviously, Sunday's game will be a lot different than these past few.
Really?
How have you just liked your team's response from that Notre Dame loss these past couple weeks?
Well, if you talk about what are some of the experiences that we've had, put games like this weekend in perspective, for about 30 years now, I don't think there's been a year goes by where we're not playing in something like the game of the century. And this year we're not. Like, they're number one, but we're not number 1A or number 2. So there were a lot of times when, we would go down. This is a relatively young rivalry that we have with South Carolina. And in the beginning, we go down there and we blow them out. And it wasn't a rivalry. It was nothing. And then it became one because both people have to win in order for it to be a rivalry. And you start to appreciate that when you have the best team, you can go down there, and not just there, it could go anywhere, really, and play a team of that magnitude and know you're going to win. And then there's some years that it's going to be a titanic struggle, and the chances of winning are not as great as when you think you have the best team in the country. So, everything is in perspective going down to play. I think we know what we're up against. We know who they are, and what they can do and what they've done. I know our guys are excited to go down and play, for sure. For sure. And the NCAA tournament is going to start in a month and a half, or maybe just exactly a month, maybe right after our tournament. The NCAA tournament is going to start in a month. And unless they lose, nobody's really going to remember that we went down there, played, and when those seedings come out, that's all that matters at that point. Who are you playing next?
To join the company you joined, one of 3 to get to that number, does that mean anything to you? And you have a chance to kind of keep going and maybe grab it all to yourself one day. Do you think about that? And how many more 100 do you have in you think?
I would think more along the lines of single digits, not hundreds. This isn't a casino ATM, where they just spit out hundreds. It's been my philosophy since the beginning that there isn't a number that I'm searching for, that I'm trying to reach, that I'm, there is no whale that I'm chasing, and obsessed over. When it's over, and whatever the number is at that time, that's what the number is going to be. And if if it's a lot, it's a lot. If it's where it is right now, it's still a lot. So I could probably say with a great deal of certainty that I'll never be number 1 in wins. I don't think that would happen. And I'm still going to enjoy my wine, and I'm going to sleep good tonight.
All right. Thanks, Coach.
Thanks, everybody.